Hi, everybody. Welcome to Jon Ferrian Live. We're doing episode 181, take two. So, if you guys watched the last episode live here, I've actually deleted that one. We were having some pretty major quality issues on that episode. So, same episode, 181 with Rich Barnett is here tonight. Thank you guys for joining us, and happy Father's Day. Thank you guys for joining us so much. We can, have you here for Father's Day. Hope you had a great weekend. Drop it in the comments and let me know what you did for Father's Day and let me know where you're watching from. And so, just if you share out the show tonight, and again, if you did share the show out the first time, if you could go back and delete that post. The original post is deleted, so it's just going to show that you didn't have any content available. So go back, if you don't mind, delete the old post that was there if you shared it to any pages, and get the new one out there, and hopefully that'll work better for everybody. So here we are. Woody's Racing is our sponsor for this particular week. We're going to give this another shot. Woody's Racing team is from Minnesota, and if you follow them on Instagram and Facebook, share the show and be ready for a T-shirt and some Idaho potatoes just for sharing the show and helping get the message out. So thank you guys for that. And let's go ahead and drop that down and let's talk a little bit about your last chance to get much of the Live Large gear, shirts like this, the Love Your Life shirts. All of this is going to be up and available through July 31st. And so on July 31st is going to be the end of an era where all of this episode or all of the logos that we had up from this last year, those are going to continue to be up there just through the end of July 31st. Last chance to get them. Get your orders in. All the money is going to continue to go out to Erie for the Live Large University Scholarship Program. So just can see we got the Live Large shirts, the Where the Journey Begins, the BRAP University with Erie on it. We got the Cal Taylor Don't Follow Cal shirts. All of those are there and ready for you. And you can get those in before the end of the month. And I think we're going to go here to Rich Barnett. So, Rich, we're going to come live to you here in 3, 2, and 1. Hey, Rich, how's it going?
Hi, John. Doing good.
Good, good. You look and sound much better than you did 27 minutes ago when we tried this the first time. Holy smokes, what a challenge we had, huh?
Yep, it was stuff happens.
Yeah,
Not
that's
sure. I'm not exactly sure why it happened, but
yeah. It's one of
it does.
the excitements of live show is that we're at the mercy of our internet connections, or at the mercy of things going on in the background, all those kind of things, and you just never know what we're going to get. But we switched you off of Wi-Fi, and you're on your cellular connection, so hopefully that'll work much better for everybody. So.
Yep, yep.
Cool, cool. Well, thank you guys who've tuned back in. And again, I would just ask that if you've already shared the show out once the first time, I've deleted the original show, so feel free to go back and just delete the post where you shared it if you don't mind, and then reshare this one to make sure that everybody gets to hear Rich's story. It's awesome. So, Rich, why don't you give us a little background on kind of who Rich Barnett is, and then I'll fill in the gap on how you and I have gotten to know each other after that.
All right. So I grew up in Montana. Worked through the cold winters, etc. I was my main hobby was skiing.
Okay.
Ended up skiing on Montana State ski team. I was a Nordic combined cross country and ski jumper. Uh, And right out of college, before I got out of college, I got married. I've been married 46 years.
Congratulations.
Uh, Thanks. 4 kids, 11 grandkids, bundles of joy. I just love them.
Happy Father's
And
Day.
thank you. So since in after my kids grew up and pretty much got out of the house, I had coached them all through all their sports and everything like that. I started pretty much my hobby and avocation was refereeing soccer. So through the years, I worked my way up to doing Pac-12 games, WAC, GNAC, all the colleges in the state, all the
Nice.
top amateur games. Uh, and that was sort of my, basically what I did on the weekends and during the week. Sometimes 7, 8 games a week. Uh, And it was during one of those games that I was talking with one of the referees on the game, and he was telling me about he had been up at Snoqualmie Pass snowmobiling.
Nice.
And I had him tell me a little bit about it or whatever, and he did. And There's a lull in soccer refereeing in December and January, Christmas, New Year's, etc. And on a whim, I just went on to Craigslist and looked, and there was a guy 12 miles away selling 2 sleds at a pretty cheap price. And
Yeah.
I thought, heck, let's do that. And I did. And the next weekend, my son-in-law and I were out at Fish Lake and riding the airstrip, running these sleds up and down it, and found the trail and went up. And once we got up to this ridge and I looked out, I mean, it's like I looked at him and I said, this is incredible. Really been, I'd never been snowmobiling to begin with, but to see
Yeah.
the beauty of the Cascades and everything was unbelievable. And I just
Yeah.
said,
Well, it's so
this is
crazy because, like, even people who consider themselves like outdoorsy people and get up into the mountains and the backcountry in the summer months, which is when most people would, for the first time to see it in a blanket of snow and all of the just the awe of the scenery and what's there. It's just that alone is enough to just like throw people like over the top on like this is like heaven on earth, right?
right. So that was 2013. And we got a few rides in before the snow melted and stuff. But 2014 came around, and by this time, I talked one of my daughters into buying a sled. My son-in-law bought another sled. I bought another one. So we had 5, and then
Okay.
we had snow tubes and stuff, and we'd go over to Fish Lake and have barbecues and tow the kids up and down the airstrip, and uh, everything was, I mean, 2014 was a pretty good year. We'd have sleds break down,
Yeah.
the older sleds, they'd break down, but, we still had 4.
Yep.
So we had a great year. I mean, it was just a lot of family. It was family orientated. And uh, so we then started to look forward to 2015, the next year. And we started off, and we had a rough start. First of all, I had 2 daughters, ended up pregnant over the winter. Then we lost them and their husbands as riders. And then my wife ran, my wife ran her sled into a tree and broke her wrist.
Oh
So
man.
she was done. Yeah, she was done. Then other people lost interest. So it pretty much got down to my son-in-law and I.
Okay.
And he ends up being given a Skidoo 1000 162 inch
Okay.
big sled. I mean, we're riding 121-inch trail sleds,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden he has this, and we were almost riding almost exclusively at Fish Lake,
Okay.
and we would go out, and all of a sudden he's off in the trees or down a hill or whatever, and I couldn't go. And it was sort of like, oh, there's another part of the snowmobiling other than just riding these trails.
Okay.
Uh, but he ended up taking off. He was a sprint car crew chief, and he ended up leaving for the winter and left me with no riding partners now. And I would ride by myself.
So
And,
the so the
I
so
got
the worst snowmobile partners in the world are me, myself, and I when you're out there by yourself, right? Because
right.
you know.
I found that out. I
Yep.
mean, I got towed in, not I think a couple of times. It didn't stop me.
Yeah.
I was a slow learner when it came to that. And I was up at Snoqualmie, and I found Crystal Springs, and I was up in Snoqualmie, and I ended up riding a day with another guy that was riding by himself. He had a snow bike,
Yeah.
and we got talking, and he said, you should join a snowmobile club because I think, you can find people to ride with and stuff. And I said, oh, how do you find them? He says, well, just go on the internet. Well, I got home that night and I went on the internet and started looking. And I found the Bavarian Boondockers.
Okay.
And I thought, well, they're in Leavenworth, but I'm riding at Fish Lake all the time. That would work out good.
Yep.
And I called them, and they pretty much weren't too, they it wasn't like they were looking for new members. And I told them I was a trail rider and just looking for people to ride. And they said, well, you're probably not, we're not the club for you because we do a lot of boondocking and off trail riding and stuff. And, you might be better off finding another club. And they recommended the Cascade Drift Skippers.
Yeah.
And I found them online and read the storyline of and it talked about club rides and, camaraderie and finding people to ride with. And I said, this is exactly what I need to do. And I signed up for it and put a note on the website that, hey, I'm looking for somebody to ride with. And within, that week, the next weekend I was riding with Theron Husband.
Yep.
And Theron.
Yeah.
That really was, I forgot to tell you, in the meantime, after my son-in-law had that long trail sled and I had another one break down, when I had to replace it, I found an old M7.
Okay.
So now I had 153 inch.
Okay.
And then I joined the CDS. Well, I went out with Theron Husband and, first ride we were talking and we were up on the logging roads by the radio towers at Crystal Springs and everything's off camber. And I kept sort of rolling off to the left and heading toward the trees and, and then I'd get off and I'd go pull my skis up and go up. And finally I asked Theron, how are you going across here? How do you go across this? And he said, well, you counter steer. I said, what is counter steering? And he said, well, you point your skis opposite of the direction you want to go, and then you give it a lot of gas.
Okay.
And so we're on this, this slope, and the trees are like, it's 5 feet away, and I point my skis toward them.
It's kind of unnerving, isn't it? You're pointing straight at a tree, and now you're going to be told to hit the gas.
Yeah, and I just said no. I'm not doing that. There's no way that sled's not going to go right into those trees. And so the next weekend we rode again.
Yeah.
And he started telling me about how he had gone to this class down in Wyoming and how improved he became in just 1 year after going to this class. He talked about when he was there how tired he was because of the altitude, but also because his sled was older than he was. I think he was riding in 2008, and this would have been 2016. So his sled was 8 model years behind what they were all riding.
Yeah.
So he started talking to me about needing new equipment, that they told him he needed new equipment, and how much he had gained out of that class. So I came home, and that summer I started talking to my son-in-law, and I said, I'm 64, you're 40. I don't have 25 years to learn how to ride a snowmobile.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to learn how to ride it, I'm going to have to get some help.
Yeah.
And so I started looking into that Dan Adams clinic.
Okay.
And in the meantime, I had listened to Theron talk about need to upgrade sleds. And I found 2 brand new sleds in Eastern Washington. This would have been 2017. I found some 2015s that were brand new dealer holdovers.
Nice.
And went and bought them. Didn't know. At this point, I still didn't know the difference between a Skidoo or a Polaris or Arctic Cat or, a Summit or a Pro. I didn't know any difference. All I knew is now I had a new sled and long track and now this was going to help make me a better rider.
Okay.
Well, it didn't, right off the bat. And so I said, hey, I got to go to this class. And my wife sort of said, no, you don't. You don't need to go to the class. And I said, I do. And so my son-in-law went to the Dan Adams Clinic,
Okay.
and it was like eye-opening. It was, first of all, just before we went to the clinic, they were having, I forgot one thing out of this. I went to the stake ride, the CDS stake ride. And one of the deals with the stake ride is they made you have all this avalanche gear, a beacon, a radio, a probe, etc. And I had none of that up until that time. I talked to the club president. I called him. I said, hey, I only ride trails. I really don't need any of this other stuff. Can I come on the stake ride? I really want to go on the stake ride and meet other riders, but I don't have any of this stuff. And he said, if you want to come, we'd love to have you, but you have to have this equipment.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's one thing that a lot of people don't always realize is that riding around a place like Washington State and many of the other western states is even if you do stick and mostly on the trails and just the open meadows, those trails cross right through avalanche terrain, and that's always been kind of, as long as I've been at the club, kind of the stance of the club. That you're talking about the Cascade Drift Skippers that we're a member of is and me being the ride coordinator, especially very familiar with it recently, where it's beacon, shovel, probe required. Highly recommended, if not almost required now, is a radio as well, just so that we can all stay in communication and stuff too. And so,
yeah,
it's something that there's a number of people every year that join the club, and that's one of the questions they ask is, really, I got to have the safety equipment? And it's like, yeah, that's kind of a non-negotiable because we can't have people who are out there with us not having the equipment and understanding how to use it to it just becomes a liability and a risk for everybody involved, both ways, both for them if they were to get injured and hurt and didn't have a beacon, and then also for the rest of us who do have the equipment, and if they're not there to support and help us in a rescue, then they're basically become extra baggage and not actually valuable to be able to support us.
right. Well, so after I bought that equipment, and then I went on that stake ride, and that's the end of the year ride for
Yeah.
pretty much. The next year, the club started advertising, sent Facebook posts out about avalanche awareness stuff that they like I-90 Motorsports, etc. It was just a 3-hour class.
Mm-hmm.
It really wasn't a class; it's more of a lesson or whatever. But so I went to that, and that was like my first introduction to the dangers of riding in the mountains. At that point, I mean, I was just pretty happy-go-lucky, just glad to be out there. I don't know how much real strong avalanche terrain I rode through. I'm sure there were some, but up until that awareness class, I really didn't have any background.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so then the Dan Adams class.
Okay.
And the first day, the first morning, that's all it was videos on avalanches, talk about the equipment, take your beacons out, take your probes out, show people how to assemble probes, etc. And during that class, he buries beacons, and you have to do live runs and unbury backpacks and stuff. Which for a riding clinic, I was really surprised. But one of our instructors had actually been buried.
Oh wow! Yeah.
And
Jason Blair, I'm sure, is who you're talking about, right? Yeah. So
right.
Jason's, for anybody who doesn't know, Jason's been on our show and has recorded an episode of this. If you go back and look it up, anybody who's watching now, you can go back and search Jon Ferrian Live, Jason Blair, and hear the story of the avalanche that he was in and how Dan Adams was involved in that as well. So.
Right. And Dan talks about basically uncovering them with his bare hands.
Mm-hmm.
And it brought a lot of realization to it. So I went to this class, and the class was extremely eye-opening because not only were there skills being taught, but the the lessons that came out of there that I came out of there with were that the equipment that everybody had, the sleds, etc., could do almost anything.
Yeah.
They were capable of climbing any hill, side hilling, etc. And we got put into situations that we would never have put ourselves into. I mean, there were times we would come over a ridge and start down into a draw, and my son-in-law and I would look at each other and go, "What are we, I mean, what are we doing here?" And then Dan would make us get, you would have to get out.
Yeah.
And so what I got out of that class is I didn't come out of there as a better rider. I came out of there with techniques to be able to practice to become a better rider.
Got it.
And he also instilled confidence in the equipment that you had, and then you had a skill set to work on. And then when I came back, then I started, not to toot your horn, but I started going on your rides.
Okay.
And you've always been helpful to people when they had questions about doing stuff, and almost as another instructor.
Yep.
And also the rides were all a real emphasis on safety. And all of a sudden I started to realize that to become a better rider, you need a mentor. You need somebody to it's one thing to sit down and watch 20 episodes of Brett Rasmussen showing you how to do stuff. And it's another thing of being able to try and take that to the snow and actually do it.
Yeah.
Without somebody there helping you. And so that first year after that Dan Adams clinic, I noticed a good progression. But
That's awesome.
I still wasn't really capable of riding backcountry. I couldn't side hill very well. My downhill turnouts, the 180-degree turnouts were most of the time 270 degrees, or a lot of times 360. I didn't have that skill set.
Yeah.
And so after that season, I decided I was going to go back.
Okay.
And so my son-in-law went back to his class again, and it was twice as hard. And it was like, well, you guys have been here once, this isn't going to be easy, and put us through a lot more skill sets. And both of us had our clutches worked on that previous summer. And so our sleds weren't working 100% right. So we went to dinner with actually Jason Blair had screwed his leg up. And so he wasn't one of the instructors this year. There was another, McNulty was there. And we went to dinner with him, and he said, what you guys should do is rent a sled. Rent a brand new one and actually see what they do.
Yeah.
And literally from the minute we pulled away from the front of the next level shop, it was unbelievable to us, the difference between a 2015 and a 2020 sled.
Yeah, because you were still riding your Articat HCR, right? Wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah, and so yeah, I mean, it's just for those, again, to your point, it's like you just don't know until you don't know. But to go from an Articat M1000 HCR, which is kind of a wide ski stance, it's not really designed to be a really nimble side hilling machine. It's more for hill. HCR stands for hill climb racer. It's like for going to Jackson Hole and shooting over the top of a big climb type of thing. And then you get into something like a Pro RMK or a Chaos or whatever the Polaris is, or even the Skidoo 850s for that matter, right? But you get into a newer machine that's even more nimble and more capable and more easy to get up on edge. And it can make a dramatic difference in your confidence and your learning, as you found out, right?
Right, right. So after that day of riding, I sat down with Dan's wife, Irina,
Okay.
And I was telling her about, hey, the difference in these sleds. And she said, yeah. She said, I have to be on the newest sled. She says, I'm a small person. I need a sled that reacts. And she said, I'd be glad to talk. And I said, well, I got to talk to my wife into letting me get a new sled. She goes, I'd be glad to talk to her,
That's awesome.
you know, and uh, came back, with more skills,
Yep.
a lot more confidence, just that second year of that class. Uh, you just come out of it with a lot more confidence. And then I went on the Highway 20 ride, and I met another rider, Mike Hansen. And Mike,
Yep.
he wasn't a CDS member, and we rode together, and I talked him into joining CDS. And at that time, probably his skill set was a little bit above mine, but not that much. And we rode all year and talked all year about the need to have the newest equipment. That at our age, that if we really want to progress in the sport, you have to have new equipment. And so we snow checked a couple of new sleds. And during this time, we're getting help from other riders and progressing, and got our new sleds, started riding them, and then the opportunity to go to the driven class in Seeley Lake. And that was the instructors there, and the instruction that they gave was it was like another level above Dan Adams, not above it, but they taught in a different manner.
Yes,
They
different
taught,
perspective. And I
yeah,
think, and I'll just pause you for a second because I think that's important for people to hear is that, whether you're going for riding skills or avalanche skills, like it's the same thing where you can go and in theory be taught the same thing in theory, but the reality is everybody's going to teach it from a slightly different perspective. And, like Dan Adams will teach you to some degree because he's a Polaris rider. He's going to teach you specific ways to ride Polaris, and that's what you ride. Great. But then you go over to the driven class, and most of those guys with the ride wrestling style are riding skidoos, right? And so they're going to give you different inputs, different techniques, slightly different than what you're going to hear. And you get to then take the best of both worlds and apply for you what works for you the best, right? And it's
right,
avalanche training too. Like I've had all kinds of different like avalanche classes from all kinds of different instructors, and each one presents the content slightly differently, and you always walk away learning something a little bit different. You continue to blend your own knowledge and build your own skill set. So
Well, that whole week there, the driven school
yeah,
with the Area One class and the companion rescue, and
yes,
then the instruction from the Rasmussen guys. And as you know, the last 2 days that we were there was so much snow.
yeah,
We've never ridden in 5 feet of new snow before,
yeah. It's
and
incredible.
yeah, but. Uh, Getting the avalanche education and then your riding skills, everything went hand in hand.
Yeah,
It was like one didn't start without the other. I mean, it was if you're going to ride in the backcountry and learn how to ride and put yourself into areas that your sled will take you, you need to be able to read the terrain and understand the terrain. And you also need to know how to work your equipment. And, the beacon training that we had there, unburying beacons, companion rescue, where you had to do two of them, that all makes a better snowmobile rider. It's not that you just learn how to read an avalanche or
hmm
read the areas that are avalanche terrain. It makes you a better snowmobiler.
yeah.
And
Well, it gives
there
you
was
it
so
gives you a different perspective and respect for the whole sport, right? Like when you understand not only just the machine and the equipment, but then how to use it, but then also then the safety side of it and how to read the terrain and how to navigate the terrain in a safer way. All of that combined is very confidence instilling, right? Like you instill so much
Right.
confidence in you, and instead of going to a hill or a play area and wondering like, man, should I be here, and being very skeptical and very skittish, you can kind of now look at it and go like, yep, this based on the avalanche forecast today and the terrain they're in and the snow we're in, this should be a good area. Let's go and focus then now just on our riding instead of having to worry about whether we're navigating the terrain safely, right?
Right. And so after the avalanche class at the Driven School, our first day of instruction, Theron and I were really fortunate that we got one-on-one training from Clyde
Mm-hmm.
and Craig. You know how to say his last
Yeah,
name,
Craig Olhauser.
Olhauser.
Yep.
We each got like an hour and a half with those two, just one-on-one, and they just in that 1.5 hours, the amount of that one-on-one training and how they helped us was, Theron and I came out of there with like our eyes open about, if we would have just known how to look this way or do this or do that
Yeah.
2 years ago or 3 years ago, we wouldn't always struggle. And it was a great class. Uh, we would have got more instruction if they could have saw our feet and our sleds the next 2 days, but
Yeah.
a lot of digging people out. But
Yep.
uh, my point of all this is that the progression from trail to off-road to avalanche training, everything goes hand in hand. And my experience has been that first of all, you need the best equipment that you can afford, and then get the education that you need, and it makes you a better snowmobiler. And uh, at 68, I don't know if I'm ever going to be considered an expert rider, but I can side hill and I can hold my own in a lot of stuff. And a lot of times I'll still look at hills and say, I don't want to go up that.
Yeah.
But at least you know, you had a guest on your show a couple weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and she talked about every time that you go snowmobiling, you have to test yourself somehow.
Yeah,
And
Julianne Chapman was on a
Julianne,
while, yeah, and she
right,
was just letting everybody know, like, as an instructor, she says, go out and push yourself out of your own comfort zone at least once or twice a day. Not necessarily all
right,
day, but just each day, push yourself a little harder, a little farther to do something that maybe you wouldn't have done before. So that's what you're referencing.
right,
Yep.
yep. And and after I watched her and the instruct and the message that she put out there, I made it a point that every ride that I went on to that I did that.
Yeah.
And I not only did that, but I made your wife do it and pushed her out of, we just sat there one day and I said, hey, remember what Julianne said? You got to push yourself.
Yeah.
And, you know, you do that and all of a sudden you realize you can do some stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you just push
And
that little bit past your comfort zone and you find success, and it just continues to build confidence. And so, I mean, there's a number of things there. Like one thing I don't want to go over too quickly and I want to talk about is this idea of backcountry snowmobiling is as much a psychological game as it is a physical and skills game, right? And so the idea of, having, quote unquote, the best equipment or the best equipment you can afford goes a long way. I mean, I'll give a specific example for me in my own riding career where, when I first started riding back in 2007, I started out on a short track sled that we had put an extra lug, thick lug track on, and that was my first year riding, and like I had a blast. But in my mind, I'm like, I'm not on a mountain sled. I'm on a non-mountain sled in mountain terrain, and so I, was very tentative. Didn't approach things really crazy and didn't even try a lot of things, right? The next year I was on a mountain sled, but it was a hand-me-down mountain sled from a buddy, and he had bought a new sled, and so his new sled had more power, it had better traction, it was, better for side hilling and all those things. And he would go do things, and I would just sit back and be like, "Yep, that's great. I'd do this little hill over here, but I'm not going to," And then there was finally a point where I was so committed to the mountain riding that I went and bought myself a brand new 2011 Skidoo E-Tech free ride. It was the all white free ride with 800 E-Tech the first year it came out. And at that point in time, I knew I now in our group had the best, most capable sled. And I knew now that if I wasn't able to do something that my buddy was able to do, it no longer was about, it wasn't about the machine anymore. It wasn't that anything was holding me back other than myself. And so
Right.
that alone, by having the right equipment that, allowed you to be able to be like, yep, the equipment can do it. I know it can. Now I just got to do it. It pushes you a little harder. It makes you go like, well, geez, look what those guys are doing on the same equipment or on equipment that's older than mine. There's no reason I shouldn't be able to do it, right? And so then to push hard. So
Right. Plus, the thing that's made an impact on me as a writer is that uh, the avalanche education, the, the the fact that you take it and then you put it into
practice.
effect.
Yep.
Yeah, you put it into practice, but uh, and that's why next year I'm going to go do it again. But when you have a guest on your show like Summer Anderson,
Yeah.
and you hear that story, and you decide that, hey, I don't want to be the person that somebody shows up at my wife's door.
Yeah.
And in fact, the avalanche education in our household has been one that my wife, when I go out on the ride, is asking me what the avalanche danger is,
That's awesome.
and she doesn't ride.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And uh, uh, you know, and then the personal story that Craig uh, Holhauser
Yep.
talked about his struggle to come back from that devastating accident,
Yeah.
etc. All that works in a way that it all hits you, and you say, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
And I just made it a personal goal that, hey, I want to be able to learn how to ride and ride correctly. And it doesn't matter what your age.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Good for you, man. Well, here you are, 68 years old, 8 years after you first started riding. And like I said, I've only been part of your life the last 3 years, roughly, when you first joined the Cascade Drift Skippers Club. And to watch your progress from, basically coming in and, barely having the new equipment with the avalanche gear and, barely getting off trail and, being able to get your sled on edge. And even I remember very vividly. I don't remember if it was the ride right before or right after you had gone to the Dan Adams Clinic. I think it was the ride right before you went to the Dan Adams Clinic. We were up at Blewett Pass, and I was like teaching you some skills, and you were practicing, and you were doing it, but you were struggling. And then you went to the Dan Adams Clinic, and I think it was just literally weeks later we went back up into different areas again. And the biggest thing I saw just from a few weeks later after going to that class was your your desire to push yourself and to try things that maybe you wouldn't have even tried before, because in your mind, like you had figured out, like, man, like I've got to push myself, I've got to try things, I've got to apply myself in order to get better, and you had some fundamental skills to try it. And I remember like just weeks after that, probably in the similar areas up at Blewett Pass again. I remember we were in an area and you were in this off camber downhill area. The sled was flat down, and you were able to get your sled up on edge and then cut up through some trees. And I think I even recorded a video of you doing it that day. And I remember being so proud of you, going like, "Yes, Rich is killing it. He's going to continue. He's getting better. He's getting better." And then now fast forward to this year, and you and I were literally just up at Bear Paw here a week ago, right? Or yeah, it was a week ago. We were up there for our last ride of the year, and there were some big climbs up there that were really high consequence that required side hilling. And you were up there going everywhere I was going. We were doing all the things together. There's other people in our group too. And frankly, it made me nervous because I'm always fearful that someone's going to get hurt and push themselves beyond their skill level. But here you are now riding some of the biggest country around the state of Washington, and navigating terrain in spring conditions when it's not very forgiving, and you're now doing it right. So congratulations on your evolution and the experiences you're able to experience now that you wouldn't have experienced. Think about that area, Bear Paw, like 2 years ago, you couldn't have gone up in there probably, right?
No, I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have been able to get through the first bowl.
Yeah. Nope.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. The I think the key to becoming a better rider is you get a mentor,
Yep.
you get instruction, you get your avalanche information, so you don't put yourself into danger, and you just keep working at it. And that was one of the things at the Rasmussen Clinic that they talked about right off the bat, and that was, we can show you how to do everything, but unless you're putting time in your seat,
Oh yeah, time in the seat. It's big.
yeah.
Awesome, awesome.
And so yeah,
Yeah.
that's my story.
That's awesome. So another thing you
Yeah.
had shared and just a couple of little tidbits about too, but I'll ask you a little further is you've been actually watching the Jon Ferrian live show for quite a while now too, and you said that there was a number of guests over time that's been real meaningful to you too, and so what's your recommendations on resources, whether it be YouTube videos like Red Rasmussen style, watching shows like this, like what are the things that you get out of these kind of shows and the content that's on them to continue to learn and grow?
Well, I think they're both beneficial. The thing that I like about your show is that it's people that are telling their actual story of how they got there, uh, but they're also telling you how they teach.
Yeah,
Well, like Julianne Chapman, she broke down how she taught and what she does with her different classes. Like she said, some days she has beginner riders and all beginner riders, and then halfway through the day, half of them have progressed beyond, and she has to adjust her skill
that's
set.
awesome.
Uh, the personal stories of people that have overcome hardships, and the people that the avalanche stories, people that have come on there that have lost people
Yeah.
are incredibly uh, difficult for me to watch without getting teary eyed and emotional,
You and me
because
both. You and me both.
it, you know, uh, those are human interest stories, and they're ones that the message is, don't have that happen to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
mean, it's like everybody. It's even the premise of this show tonight is like, here's the thing is if at 60 years old you had immediately gotten good equipment, safety training, skills training, it wouldn't have taken you 8 years to get to where you're at today. Like it would have probably been in 2 years or 3 years, and now the last 5 years of your journey, you could have been just enjoying and continue to push and progress yourself versus
right,
the first 5 years of your journey were just trying to figure out the fundamentals and the basics. And it's really been this last 3 to 4 years that you've really accelerated your riding to the point where you've become proficient at it. And, think about all the time we've missed out on that, right? And for me even, right? And Rich, for what it's worth, my struggle was even longer. Like for me it was 2007 and until 2011, so there was 4 years where I would only ride 1 week a year, two maybe 3 weeks a year tops, and it was nobody out there teaching me. I didn't take any skills classes, nothing. I just was trying to watch YouTube videos and then practice myself. And then you get to the point where it's like, okay, now I moved to Washington State and I can ride every weekend with people. And in many cases, like you advised, ride with people who are better than you. But even then, like I was always the guy like, I don't need to take a training class and take a train. Like what I know now, like I'm at the point where I did take a class with you, but I'm already at the point where I'd progressed enough. But it's taken me so many years to get to that level that if I had in 2007 or 8 taken a class, I probably could have been doing that level of writing most of my writing instead of just
right.
this last so many years. So hindsight's 2020. Learn from others, follow some mentorship and some advice, and you'll accelerate everything way quicker than you think. So, and it's the other thing too is learning bad habits. Like for people who are long-term proficient writers, probably got a lot of bad habits out there that you go to a training class and they'll try to help you like unlearn some of your bad habits, and be surprising how much of an unlock that is. I mean, I'll give you an example like this motorcycle safety class that we just went through. The more and more I learn, the more I find that there's so many similarities to backcountry snowmobiling to motorcycling. Things like counter steer, the concept of it and how you use it and apply it, right? Dragging your brake. Like I'd never thought of like dragging your brake on a motorcycle. It wouldn't even cross my mind. But guess what? All day long on my snowmobile, like I got my finger covering the brake and dragging it. And like when
Hmm.
I'm doing sharp U-turns and slow speed maneuvers, I was using my foot brake to kind of drag to kind of help maintain control, and it totally worked just like when I was snowmobiling, right? And it was tips that the instructors gave you, and because I had that experience snowmobiling, I ended up, learning pretty quickly, and you know, amongst, I think, a dozen people in the class. Max and I probably finished the class as some of the top riders in the class by the time it was done. And I correlate it to a little bit of practice that we did the last few weeks, but to a lot of things that translate from my snowmobiling experience and what I've learned there. So,
Right, right.
yeah, but getting
And
instruction goes
th-
a long way.
and once you develop a bad habit, it can be a long process to get rid of it.
Amen. Yep. Great.
Yep, yep.
Well, Rich, I think we can kind of wrap this up for tonight. Unless you got any final thoughts, any final things you want to say?
Thanks for having me on, John.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Well, I
And
think thanks to everybody who's had the patience to watch the first part of the show and then back on the show. And we've had no technical difficulties the second phase, so it worked out pretty well. But hopefully we didn't lose too many people in the meantime. So, all right, everybody.
right.
God bless you
Thanks,
all.
John.
Have a great night, and don't forget to live large, live life to the fullest, make the most of every day. And Rich, what do? We make a difference to others, right? That's what we're here for.
That's right.
Awesome.
Yep.
Appreciate you, buddy.
Thanks, John.
Thanks.
All
Bye.
right. Bye.